You hear the music. You know what that means. The ESPN college basketball theme. It means that it is November, officially November 1st, in the year of our Lord 2021, and college basketball season is 8 days away. And with that being said, it is time to introduce to you ESPN 1025 The Game's newest college basketball podcast that you can hear on this podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. It is Courtside with Campbell and Knezovic. I am Elijah Campbell. By day, I am the producer for Darren, Donick, and Chase, and now by night, I will be the co-host of this college basketball podcast, along with, by day, producer for Robbie and Rex Road, and by night, co-host of this podcast, Michelle Knezovic. Michelle, welcome to our first ever edition of this show. College basketball 8 days away. We finally have a platform to be able to spew our college basketball nonsense with. I'm excited to get this thing started and excited to have you on to join me.
Elijah, is it Christmas? Because that just got me so fired up. The music, the introduction, so excited. I started just, doing research for this, and I was like, wow, this is going to be a great season. You start looking into the teams more because we're in football season kind of right now. We're at that weird transition point. And now once I heard the music, I'm so ready for it next week, kicking it off. I'm hyped.
So the season starts in 8 days, technically. We have the honor and the pleasure to have the Champions Classic in like 10 days, where Kansas, Michigan State meet, and then Kentucky and Duke meet, which is the one I'm personally excited for. I'm sure even your average or casual college basketball fans are going to be a little more excited for. I know you're going to be, you have a little more of a dog in the fight there, as you are a Kentucky grad, a Kentucky and a Syracuse grad, two basketball schools.
Can you tell I'm a basketball fan? It's practically the reason I went to both schools. No, I'm very nervous because this first game of the year, you always have, your top 25 poll, whatever. Kentucky's always usually nationally ranked, right? You got a lot of recruits and everything. And this game they play in every single year. And every single year.
Always a tough test to start the season.
If they don't perform well, they're the worst team in college basketball. And if they perform well, they're the best team in college basketball. So I really like either way, it's like you can't win.
Were you there the year that Zion that Duke team ended up beating them by 40 in the first week of the season? And I can only imagine now, like obviously wasn't there, but I remember watching the game. I can only imagine that was probably the sky is falling game for Kentucky. And they turned out to have a really good year, after that, losing in the Elite Eight to Auburn, and Duke ended up losing the Elite Eight as well. But there were a 40-point difference between those two teams, and they were 40 points difference at the end of the year. I can only imagine that went over completely smooth over in Lexington.
My senior year, Michelle, drove up to Indianapolis. I had my credential ready.
Oh, you were there.
I was so excited covering the first game of the season. I was in the little press box. I was like, this is great. I interviewed Reese Davis beforehand, Jay Billis. I'm like, this is going to be great, And the game starts.
Yeah.
And it's going to be great. Turned around real quick. And I think I just kind of sat there very sad. They, like you said, they ended up turning it around, but it's overreaction season. We said this at the beginning of college football, the beginning of NFL. We're going to say all this stuff about all these teams, and we could be wrong in 2 weeks, but hey, that's why we're here.
And that was obviously that's my favorite example of like these early November games where like just bleep completely hits the fan for one team. And you can still go on to have a really good season, especially when it comes to teams like Duke and Kentucky that are out there trotting out freshmen, sometimes starting lineups of nothing but freshmen. So it makes a little more sense for, those kind of outcomes to happen. Or you have the instances like in 2015 or 14-15 where Kentucky beats the brakes off of Kansas. It's an almost 50-point game, and Kentucky goes on to win every game except for the Final Four game. So there's a couple of good examples of how this kind of stuff works in November, but excited to have this season long. A lot of good underlying college basketball storylines that we'll get to experience this year. And here on this podcast too, an exclusive college basketball podcast. We're going to be giving you everything from team breakdowns, game reactions. Going to be at some games this year. There's so much going on with this that I'm excited to start. And specifically these opening games, which we'll go to a little more intensively here in these next coming days. We'll have a Belmont preview that we'll be recording later this week. We finally get to go to some practices because COVID restrictions are starting to be lifted a little bit. And that's one thing we didn't really get to do last year, was get to go to practices. We were able to cover some games, but not many. Your access was a little more limited. So for a new year, we're going to have, better access points, be able to do more journalistic work, which is what we got into this business to do to begin with. How excited are you to finally be able to do that? I know people don't want to hear us gassing up our jobs all day because we have the best in the world, but how excited are you to finally be able to get to do that this year? And how big is it going to be for the sport of college basketball, given, the super seniors that are coming back? We're going to see a lot of crazy experienced teams because of the extra year of eligibility that everyone was granted last year because of the COVID year, a record number of transfers. There's so much about college basketball, NIL too. There's so much about college basketball that in November of 2021 is drastically different than November of 2020 or November of 2019.
Elijah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. And I think it's very easy to forget about what sports used to be like pre-COVID. Just because this last year and a half, pushing 2 years, has been so significant in our society that it almost feels like the norm now to put a mask on if you're covering professional sports, to get tested every single week, or X, Y, and Z players are out on COVID, or you have a Zoom press conference because they're out on COVID. But I think for me, one of the biggest things that I'm so excited to get back is just to have these stadiums and arenas filled with fans, because yes, it's a sporting event, but it is so much more than that, especially in these towns with teams like Alabama and Kentucky. Those states don't even have professional sports. So we're lucky in Nashville. Yes, we have an NFL team. We have an NHL team. But I'm going to bring up Kentucky. But that basketball team is a professional sports team, essentially, in that town. And it brings communities together. And just so many people are there cheering them on. And it can have an effect on teams. You get a really young Kentucky team going into a full packed Auburn basketball game on the road. That can easily affect them, at the foul line, getting nervous, people chanting at you. And I also specifically think of the One Shining Moment video after March Madness, which is my favorite video ever. One of my favorite parts of college basketball is seeing that 1 minute and 30 seconds or 2 minute clip, just recapping the entire tournament and how big the fans are a part of it. You see people in the crazy outfits or just doing crazy stuff, crazy signs. And it just, at the end of the day, it brings people together, brings communities together. It's fun in a world filled with not the happiest stuff. College sports are fun and just a lot of passion. And I just really can't wait for it. I can't wait to meet a lot of the players in the Nashville market because I just moved here. I've already met a lot of the Belmont players, excited to cover that team with you. They've gotten national attention. We've got Tennessee just 2 hours away. We've got Vanderbilt with Mr. Scottie Pippen, who's created a lot of attention throughout that.
SEC Player of the Year preseason.
Yes, exactly. You got Memphis 2 hours the other direction. And then the SEC as a whole, which we're going to be covering all of that on this podcast, going a bunch of different directions, but just really excited to get started and check out which teams are, going to catch our eye this season.
Man, I can't describe to you how weird it was to see Cameron Indoor Stadium or Rupp Arena, the Carrier Dome, Fog Allen, all of these historic venues of college basketball that are made great because of the fans that fill them, not have fans in them and have cardboard cutouts and all this mess. And you're right. That's what makes college basketball special. That's what makes all of this so much fun. And while we still may have, some fun last year, it wasn't the same without the fans, consistent rosters because, there's so many games canceled, especially cool non-conference matchups that we were kind of rocking up because of COVID. But we finally get that back. We finally get to have a closer to normal college basketball season this year. And this, especially this podcast, this first one of ours, can be the ceremonious open to it. We'll go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to break down our personal top 10 teams in the country as a reaction to the AP Top 25 that just came out last week. We'll give our thoughts on that poll, give our top 10 teams, who's ranked too high, who's ranked too low. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, especially where Kentucky goes. I'm kind of favorable of them this year, and I'm sure you are too. We'll get into that on the other side of the first rendition here of Courtside with Campbell Knezovic right here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Indeed, they are. Maybe you're not right now. They're practicing basketball right now, but we might not be playing basketball for at least another week. Welcome back into Courtside with Campbell Knezovic right here on ESPN 102.5 The Game and The Game podcast platforms. Season starts in a week. The Associated Press Top 25 is out, which means it is officially college basketball season. In what better way to analyze this list than to take some notes and compare notes between the two of us? Michelle, I'll go ahead and read off the top 25 here. Or not top 25, top 10. Top 10 of the 25, because that's what we made our list for. Our top 10 teams coming into this year. We can play too high, too low. We'll compare some notes here and see the teams that we are most excited for on a national level here in college basketball. The AP has it Gonzaga as your number 1 team to start the year. UCLA at number 2. Kansas, number 3. Villanova, number 4. Texas, number 5. Michigan, number 6. Purdue, 7. Defending champion Baylor at 8. Duke and Kentucky rounding out the top 10 as they will play their first game of the season against each other at 9 and 10. So, Michelle, I'll go ahead. We'll get your list right here. And you tell me who is ranked too high, who might be ranked too low, and what do you have as your best 10 teams coming into the 2021-2022 college basketball season?
Awesome. I do have to say something, though, first. You know that is my favorite song ever, the basketball song.
Oh, yes.
You played that. I didn't know you were going to play that. I just got so excited.
Oh, man. That song alone is a good basketball history lesson. The names dropped in those rhymes by Curtis Blow are a fantastic little
Vince
basketball.
Carter put his arm in the rim. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's amazing. Yeah, a beautiful history of basketball by Curtis Blow. So I thought it's only fitting for us to have our first actual segment outside of the intro be basketball with Curtis Blow. It makes sense. It just made sense.
Oh, it's perfect sense. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to read my list, and then I'm going to give you guys some takeaways, who's too high, who's too low, or so specific players. Wow, I can't speak. Some specific players on each team or standouts that I think you should look for or are going to have a pretty good season. Okay, first I've got UCLA. We saw them have a great run in the tournament last year. They were an 11th seed, and Johnny Wuzang, just former Kentucky player.
That's right, Kentucky transfer, Johnny Wuzang.
Just really led that team and had a phenomenal performance in the tournament. Second, Gonzaga. No surprise with that one. You know, they made it all the way, almost had an undefeated season, but I do think that they're going to have a big loss this season without Jalen Suggs on the team. I think that, we saw him have a great tournament run, but I think he was a big piece of their puzzle. So I'm interested to see how they're going to fill his space moving forward. 3, I've got Kansas. 4, Baylor. 5, Texas. I am so excited to see this Texas team this year. You know, you've got a lot of veteran players. I pulled up their roster right before this, and I didn't count it, but it was a majority of seniors and juniors on the team with also you're going to see a lot this year of either grad transfers or student athletes just getting that extra COVID year. So teams like Gonzaga, kids that would have graduated, they're obviously going to take the other year if they're not going to be a lottery pick and they don't know what their professional career holds, whether it be overseas or whether it be in the G League. I think we're going to see a lot of teams earlier in this season, a lot more put together just for the sole fact of having so many players who are staying and taking that extra year just solely because the team's already played together. Okay, Texas 5, very excited for that team. Houston number 6. I remember them beating Syracuse in the tournament last year and remember thinking going in, oh, Buddy Boeheim, he's going to have a great game. Syracuse is fine. Houston surprised the heck out of me. I looked on their website. Also, looks like the city of Houston's excited. Third season, their tickets are sold out. Men's basketball, entirely sold out. Their leading scorer is a sophomore, Marcus. He's coming back. The team really made a statement.
Yeah.
Yep, Sasser. Team made a statement in the tournament last year. Plus, they're in the American Conference. So, yeah, you have Memphis. But there really aren't a lot of – I mean, Cincinnati here and there. But there aren't a lot of other teams who are going to make that much of an impact, like we just talked about. In the top 25 polls, their conference schedule is not going to be very hard. So they're probably going to have a really good record. So we're really going to have to base a lot of these also on their non-conference games, playing some ranked teams. 7th, we got a hometown fave, Memphis. Penny Hardaway. I am so excited to see this team this year. So excited to see Amani Bates and how he is going to, develop into the college player and see if he actually can take this team and if all the hype surrounding him really plays out. 8, I've got an SEC team, Arkansas. I have loved watching this SEC team, rise. You've got Devo Davis, who's a rising star, one of the season's best defensive players. Usually it's Kentucky in the SEC. Bama's been on the rise. Auburn's been on the rise. But this Arkansas team, I would not count them out yet. 9.
Love Eric Musselman too, by the way.
Yes,
I think he might be might be one of the best 3 or 4 coaches in all of college basketball. And that's not an exaggeration. The guy can coach.
Yes, exactly. He has really built that program within the last couple of years, getting just a number of different recruits, and it's definitely paying out for that program. Number 9, Lexington, baby, Big Blue Nation,
Okay.
My Kentucky Wildcats. They had significant changes in the offseason. I know everybody can say they had an awful record last year. They didn't even make the tournament, yada, 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 all this stuff. They have practically everybody returning. You've got Davion Mintz, who he was a transfer last year. He's coming back. He's a veteran player. I think he's almost like 23 years old, so he's definitely going to be an older voice on the team. You've got Dante Allen, who's been there for a couple of years. You've got Toppin. You've got Oscar Shebaway, which I am so excited to see him. He is a
huge transfer get from West Virginia.
Huge.
Elite shot blocker.
Exactly. Huge size on the team. That's a lot of what Kentucky lacked last year. They didn't really have anybody who was really big in the paint and could guarantee those shots. Also, they've had significant coaching changes. Joel Justice went to Arizona. You got Orlando in. You got Coleman in. Cal really switched things around, and I'm really interested to see what changes as far as the way they play. I saw some tweets. They were practicing 2-3 zone the other day. I was like, what the heck are we doing?
Doing the Jim Boeheim.
Exactly. A little worried about that, but I saw a little bit of that. And then finally coming in at number 10 for me, we've got Duke. This is going to be Krzyzewski's last dance. No surprise I have them in my top 10. They're always a great team.
Recruiting class. Yeah.
Not too crazy last year, but I got them at number 10. But I guess biggest takeaways, really excited for Texas, which I didn't think would be in my top 10. And then also Houston. Those two big Texas teams. Those are the 2 teams I'm really excited to watch out for. And I know I just made that list all over the place, but
that's a good list. Yeah. See, yours strayed more from the APs than mine is. That's my favorite thing about it is, and I like a good, unique list here. I like Houston a lot. I have them just missing the top 10. I love Marcus Sasser. Guy can absolutely score the ball. And in an offense like Houston's, where it's not predicated on a lot of shot making, it's a lot of grabbing your own misses. I mean, that was the best offensitive rebounding team by a mile in college basketball last year.
That was the main reason they beat Syracuse last year.
Because they have such a large margin for error because they are able to not only clean up the misses that they do have from the outside. Those misses are usually 5 to 6, 7 feet away from the rim. You're then creating other shots by missing shots. Like it's really weird in a way that you're creating better shots off the shots you miss than a lot of the shots you get throughout the regular fluidity of your offense. but Houston was like the poster boy for that last year, and it took them to a Final Four. So it's hard to argue with the results there for Houston. Memphis is interesting too because they're just so young. I mean, they might get Amani Bates for 2 years because he's not going to turn 18 until January. He won't even be draft eligible this year. So you're going to get a full year, maybe 2 if he decides to come back for another year instead of playing overseas or taking a year off.
Or the G League Ignite team. But I think Memphis is going to be a true test to Penny Hardaway because they do have such a young team. I want to see how he gets them all together. Is he able to get this team on the right page and able to, like how Coach Cal does so frequently? You bring in 5 freshmen, the first game of the year, you're like, oh gosh, this is going to be a dumpster fire. By March, they're making it to the Elite Eight. They're doing things like that. Can Penny Hardaway develop these freshmen in such a short span of time?
Exactly. And he made some additions to the coaching staff with Larry Brown and Rasheed Wallace. So not only are they one of the most interesting teams in the country, they probably have the most interesting coaching staff in the country as well. So to add to boot, a lot of TV value with Memphis there. Mine, I have Gonzaga number 1. I love what the Zags at least bring back. They don't have a lot of returning starters back. Really just Andrew Nembhard and Drew Timme, who is a popular pick for preseason player of the year in all of college basketball. Guy was top 10 in both effective field goal shooting and true shooting. Probably the best 2-point shooting big in basketball last year. And then they got Chet Holmgren, the number 1 recruit in the country, 7'1" small forward, shooting guard, like wing player. I mean, it's hard to really get into him. Yeah, the guy's a freak, and he's going to be a top 3 or 4 NBA draft pick. Love that right there. I'm like you. I love Texas, and I love them enough to put them at number 2. And there's 2 things with Texas. They're either going to fulfill that spot and be the number 2 team in the country, because I think they have the number 2 roster in the country right now.
I completely agree.
They have the potential for it to go south very fast. Only key contributors they really have that played significant minutes and had significant usage within the offense was Andrew Jones and Courtney Ramey, 2 solid quality guards. Everybody else is new. They had the number 75 recruiting class in the country because they didn't look for high schoolers to build this roster. Chris Beard took the job after leaving Texas Tech and then got Christian Bishop, who was one of the leading scorers for Creighton, who had one of the better offenses in college basketball last year.
Creighton was phenomenal last year.
Was fantastic and was, in my opinion, outside of Marcus Zagorowski, their best player en route to a Sweet 16 run in the NCAA tournament. Quality college basketball player. Dylan Dessou from Vanderbilt, as we saw here, was the sidekick for Scottie Pippen. And really had a fantastic year last year, and they were a lot different team whenever Dessou went down. Marcus Carr, who is probably the most coveted transfer in the transfer market from Minnesota, an all Big Ten caliber player. Trey Mitchell, UMass's leading scorer, small or power forward, one of the more coveted prospects as well. Timmy Allen, an all Pac-12 player from Utah, coming in, 6'6" guard, going to make a difference. Devin Askew from Kentucky, not asking from him. Yeah, he was the starting point guard for Kentucky last year. He's going to be the 7th or 8th man on this team. So while he didn't play very well at Kentucky last year, he doesn't have to have the workload he did at Kentucky. It's going to be a lot easier of an environment for him to succeed. So the talent's there for him, and you saw it firsthand.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one with him. He was a freshman coming in with pretty much an all freshman sophomore squad. And I think what you saw was him just really nervous and not comfortable on the court last year, wasn't really able to make anything happen. That's why you saw Davion Mintz take over. But I do think he's a great player. I just think he was surrounded by a lot of inexperienced guys, as he was one of them. And I think moving into this Texas team, this very veteran squad, I think it's going to be a really good fit for him.
And especially with a coach, too, a coach that specializes in playing or coaching guys that are a little older. Chris Beard gets a lot out of that type of player. Number 3, I got Villanova. I am very high on Villanova just because of the returners they get back. Colin Gillespie's a preseason All-American guy. A lot of his production is going to be based on how well he recovers from his torn ACL that he had in early February, which cost him his season and really, in my opinion, cost Villanova 1 seed. I mean, that was a team all year long that was destined to take the 1 seed. They underachieved, well, I guess, without him. I mean, he is the point guard. He's the guy that runs the offense. I love that Justin Moore and Jermaine Samuels are coming back too. The biggest loss of Jeremiah Robinson Earl. which is a significant loss. To me, was like the closest thing to Al Horford we've seen in college basketball since Al Horford left Florida.
Yep.
And I think he'll have a fine NBA career. But Villanova brings back a majority of the team in a recruiting class, which is going to be good enough. I think the recruiting class was 22nd in the country. They don't bring in guys that are one and dones. So the fact that you get a Villanova team this experience leads me to take them at number 3.
Not to mention with Villanova, sorry, real quick, they've got a coach who doesn't have a problem getting it done in tournament time.
And a guy who doesn't have a problem getting it done, a guy who has revolutionized the way college basketball is played in terms of it being more perimeter oriented. I mean, one of the greatest teams that we've ever seen was his last national title team that might have been the greatest three-point shooting team of all time. He's really good as a shooting coach and being able to put players in those type of positions. Huge Jay Wright fan. Number 4, UCLA. I love that UCLA brings literally every single key returner back from last year's team.
I love him.
Tiger Campbell, Jaime Jaquez, who was one of the out of nowhere stars in this NCAA tournament this year. The reason I put them 4 instead of higher, maybe over someone like Texas, is that the larger sample size last year suggested that they were an 11 seed. They really did struggle at times. I thought it took them a little while or a little longer than usual to adjust to maybe Mick Cronin's coaching style or just like Mick Cronin has had a long history of boring to watch teams. They're going to grind it out. They kind of play a lot like what Kelvin Sampson's Houston teams play. Sometimes it can be an acquired taste. And I feel like that might have been why UCLA took a little longer. What's crazy, it's funny how basketball fate works. This team was down double digits well into the second half against Michigan State in the first 4 game. And our opinion of this UCLA team is not the same if Michigan State closes that game out. UCLA doesn't make this miracle run, which was ended by a miracle shot at the buzzer in the Final Four.
I mean, they could have won the game easily. It's March.
It's March. They got marched. UCLA marched and got marched. And that's exactly how this happens. Number 5, Purdue. This is one of the more interesting teams for me. I have Purdue higher than what they're actually ranked. They're one of the biggest teams in the country. They return literally their first 9 players in points per game. All their production last year comes back. I think Jaden Ivey, their point guard, will be one of the more improved players in the country. Really played well from what I've heard and seen in the FIBA under-19 circuit. Yeah, he had a fantastic year. And it helps that, Matt Painter is kind of like Jay Wright in a way of his best teams are always the more experienced ones. He's really good at roster retention and bringing a lot of guys back. And it helps to bring back guys with size like Travion Williams or Zach Edey, who is 7'4". They're going to have one of the biggest teams and toughest teams in college basketball. And if it wasn't for a matchup nightmare with North Texas in the first round last year, I think they could have made a run. But sometimes you get marched, and that's exactly what happened to Purdue. Matchups play a big deal. Yeah, matchups play a big deal in those kind of games. Number 6, Michigan. Michigan brings back Hunter Dickinson, who I think will probably be the best center in college basketball this year defensively. They have the number 2 recruiting class, and that's not even counting Juwan Howard's son, who recently committed to play at Michigan as well. They're a well-coached team. Eli Brooks is coming back too, so they have a good mix of some experience on a really good team last year and a bunch of incoming talent. Really, that's one of my favorite parts about this Michigan team too. And the most underrated part, because people love to talk about the recruiting class, which, like I said, second best in the country, a number 10, 16, and 46 recruit. But they got Devontae Jones from Coastal Carolina in the transfer portal. Devontae Jones, the reigning Sun Belt Player of the Year from the Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina. That's going to be significant too. It only sprinkles into the notion of this team being incredibly talented and young, but also having that experience. I love Juwan Howard as a coach. Phil Martelli might be the most valuable assistant coach in college basketball. So I'll take Michigan at number 6. Number 7, your Kentucky Wildcats, Michelle Knezovic. Your Kentucky Wildcats. I'm a little higher on them. And I
love it.
Yeah, love them because I like the combination of experience, great recruiting. I mean, they obviously have one of the best recruiting classes in the country. Ty Washington was one of the more coveted point guard recruits in the country. You desperately needed that when you lost Evan Askew to the transfer portal.
Exactly.
But and you nailed all of the good transfers that they got. But Kellen Grady from Davidson might be the most important one. The guy was a lights-out scorer at Davidson, one of the best scorers they've seen at that school since Steph Curry. Don't know if you heard of that guy, but Kellen Grady.
Oh, yeah, he's all right.
It's not bad, not bad. I don't know what he's doing now.
He scored 30 in the first half the other day or something.
Yeah, he's doing well for himself now too. And Kellen Grady has been one of the better players since that era of Davidson basketball. All these accolades in the Atlantic 10, I think he is going to make a huge impact. I love CJ Frederick transferring from Iowa, probably the best three-point shooter in the portal last year, shot 47% from three at Iowa.
Insane.
That's one thing Kentucky couldn't do at all last year, was shoot the basketball. So
we couldn't.
Oh, yeah. So the acquisition of CJ Frederick from Iowa is massive for this Kentucky team. At number 8, the team that I have probably the most question marks about outside of Texas, but maybe not as 1 to 10 roster talent, is going to be Kansas. Kansas brings back a lot, like Baji, Jalen Wilson, a lot of those guys. David McCormick's coming back too. I feel like David McCormick has been at Kansas for over a decade. He's becoming what Perry Ellis was. But they raked in the transfer portal, but did it by getting 3 of the more coveted point guard transfers in the country. So it's going to make things a little weird. Remy Martin from Arizona State was a preseason Pac-12 Player of the Year, preseason All-America last year going into last season, and underachieved. That Arizona State team brutally underachieved. And I don't think he got that much better year in, year out at Arizona State. So who knows what Bill Self is going to do to his confidence, is going to be able to do to him as a player. But he was a highly coveted recruit. You got Joseph Yusufu from Drake, who was the Missouri Valley Conference 6th Man of the Year. I don't think he cracks the starting lineup, but you're going to have to be able to have some depth to win in college basketball. So I like Kansas at number 8 if they are able to maintain that depth, utilize the transfers, figure out a way to use all these point guards too that they have. They got a transfer from Iowa State who's also a point guard. So that's 3 people right now that are going to be in the point guard rotation for Kansas off transfers alone. They're going to have a lot of roster construction to figure out here in terms of what pieces go where. At number 9, Baylor. Love Baylor. Obviously, they're the defending champions, so you got to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. And they brought back a lot of key pieces, too. Flo Thamba, Matthew Mayer, Adam Flagler, and Jonathan Shashua from the championship team. Shashua and Flo Thamba were the key pieces, along with Mark Vital, to physically beating the hell out of Gonzaga in that game. They bullied them physically on the boards, in 2-point range. They really put the fear of God in Gonzaga in the first 6 minutes of that game in terms of physicality standpoint. And those guys are the ones that are coming back. Matthew Mayer, who is getting some NBA draft love as a 6'8", 6'9" kind of wing player who can just shoot the lights out. And, of course, Adam Flagler, who was the kind of the catalyst off the bench last year, the Presbyterian transfer from a couple of years ago, who played a very key role on that Baylor team in terms of shooting. And then, of course, they have the number 13 recruit in the country, in Kendall Brown and Langston Love, a shooting guard prospect from high school, as the number 40 recruit in the country, who's coming in as well. Might take a little bit of a slower start, but Scott Drew's got a really good team there that's coming back. They're the defending champions, so I feel almost obligated, considering how many people they got back from the team and the additions that they got. So despite losing, the Jared Butlers, the Mark Vitals, the Davion Mitchells, I still like Baylor a lot this year. And that 3-team race at the top of the Big 12 between Texas, Kansas, Baylor is going to be fun to watch on a nightly basis. And then number 10, our only common denominator here for both of our lists, Duke. Coach K's last dance, John Shire waiting in the wings. They obviously brought back a lot of good talent. Wendell Moore's coming back, a guy who I thought was probably the most important player last year, along with Matthew Hurt, and then Paulo Banchero, who was a top, 3 or 4 recruit in the country, a guy who by a lot of NBA mock drafts that I have seen, these way too early mock drafts. So it's just them watching him coming out of high school, being a potential number 1 draft pick going into next year. So they are a very intriguing team. And then right outside the top 10, Houston, Illinois, Memphis, Alabama, Arkansas. Really love those teams. Like you made a lot of good points on Arkansas. Chris Likes from Miami, a transfer who is going to play for Arkansas this year, is one of the more impactful transfers available in the transfer portal. I love what Musselman's done there. JD Notae comes back too, who was probably the most important bench player for Arkansas. I mean, he won them a couple games when Moses Moody wasn't shooting the ball very well. I love Alabama coming back this year too. They have a key transfer of their own from Furman, who was one of the best players in the SoCon last year. They returned a lot of production.
They had a great team last year, Alabama.
Oh, yeah. And like Villanova, you can put Alabama in the category of they will always be good because their coach has a great philosophy. They're very analytically sound. They get to the free throw line a lot. They love to shoot threes, especially corner threes, and Nate Oates recruits guys who can shoot them. Namari Burnett, also a good impact transfer from Texas Tech, a guy who could fit into that system as well. Maybe play the Herb Jones role because they lost Herbert Jones, SEC Player of the Year, to the NBA draft. So that's a big hole that needs to be filled. But it's something they can do. If there's anybody that can do it, I love Nate Oates' philosophy, how he runs his team. And it's not going to be an easy SEC title defense for Alabama, but it's incredibly possible that they go back-to-back regular season and conference championship or conference tournament championship. Again, I really just love the roster construct of that team and the philosophy. Alabama's slowly fallen into the Villanova role for me, where I'm going to like them at a base regardless because of who their coach is. I just like those type of coach teams. So, Michelle, our top 10s, of course, and like you said in the first segment too, everything we say here can be completely irrelevant after the first week of games.
Elijah, you know what I just realized after we just went through that? I was like thinking, and I was like, yeah, we have a lot of Big 12 teams, SEC teams. Traditionally, the ACC is the best in basketball. I think we only had Duke. And it was at our 10. It was at 10. Was that the only that was the only ACC team we had?
You're right. A lot of ACC teams flew under the radar last year. Like Georgia Tech was a late bloomer.
Syracuse made a good run last year.
Syracuse was a late bloomer too. They weren't overwhelming in the regular season. Florida State, you could have said, was the favorite last year, and they're going to be good this year too. They worked the transfer portal well, and they had a really good recruiting class. And Leonard Hamilton's teams are always at least 10 deep. I mean, that guy platoons his lineup. So you'll have Florida State. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were the last 2 years, but I like Florida State a lot. But there's really not a ton this year. I think the ACC is going to be a little down.
I can agree with that, and I think the Big 12 is stepping it up. We just named a couple of teams that are going to be, significant in there. You got Texas, Kansas, and who's the other one? I forget it. Oh, Baylor.
Yeah.
Obviously the SEC, always Alabama, Kentucky, Arkansas, Auburn will be good.
Even Tennessee's going to be good.
Tennessee's going to be good. The ACC, I will say, I was looking at Syracuse. I think they'll have a slow start, but I'm intrigued to see how they play this year. I don't know if you saw, but Jim Boeheim has both of his sons on the team.
Oh, wow.
So
I'm surprised. Yeah, he has kids that age.
Yeah, his older son is doing his 5th year here. He played at Cornell.
Wow. Okay.
Ivy League didn't have a season last year. He graduated. Now he's playing here. Think about it. Him and Buddy have been playing the 2-3 zone since they were born,
They're born into a life of playing the 2-3 zone. Yeah. Exactly. So if there's anyone that's going to get it off the bat, it's going to be those two.
They didn't really graduate a lot of players. They made a deep run. Buddy Boeheim is expected to have he was like top scorer in the ACC last year. So I think that might be a little dark horse team for you.
Okay, interesting. Syracuse as the dark horse. And, of course, in March, Syracuse finds a way to mess up people's brackets, whether they are a 2 or 3 seed or an 11 seed. They always find a way to do it. Michelle, we have one in the books. We have one episode here in the books. We still have a week until regular season action. Until then, we're going to be bringing you all of the coverage. We're going to preview Belmont in our next episode. We're going to be breaking down Vanderbilt. They're going to be an interesting team coming into the year. Tennessee, mid-majors, everything. We've only just begun, to quote the late Karen Carpenter, we have only just begun, and this is the first of many episodes of what is going to be an exciting college basketball season.
I'm so excited. It's going to be a great year. We've got a lot of teams in the area. We made our top 10s, and they'll probably change, like you said, next week. But next week will be the Champions Classic will be Tuesday. We're going to get things rolling. And, Ash, I'm so excited to be doing this alongside.
That's right. Episode 1 of a very long season ahead of us. Excited to go ahead and get started. And you have been listening to the first rendition of ESPN 1025 The Game's newest college basketball podcast, Campbell and Knezovic, Courtside with Campbell and Knezovic. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you find your podcasts. Stick with us. We'll be back this time next week.